I want to ask you what part of the country you come from.
I originate from Canada. I guess where that is.
Oh, I know where Canada is. I've been there myself.
Well, travel for a slave.
Solomon Northup is an expert player on the violin.
I was born a free man, lived with my family in New York.
Be good for your mother.
Until the day I was deceived.
To Solomon.
Kidnapped, sold into slavery.
Well, boy, how you feel now?
My name is Solomon Northup. I'm a free man.
And you have no right whatsoever to detain me.
You're no free man. You're nothing but a Georgia runaway.
Went down to the river Jordan.
And that servant
That don't obey his Lord
shall be beaten with many stripes. That's scripture.
The condition of your laborers, it's all wrong.
and my property.
You say that with pride.
I say it as fact.
Man does how he pleases with his property.
You come here.
I said come here!
Days ago, I was with my family, in my home. Now you tell me all is lost.
If you want to survive, do and say as little as possible.
Solar rising.
Well, I don't want to survive.
For the year when
I want to live.
I thought you knowed something.
I did as instructed. There's something wrong. It's wrong with the instruction.
Master brought you here to work. Any more, I'll earn you 100 lashes.
I know what it's like to be the object of Master's lash. In his own time, good Lord will manage them all.
I will survive. I will not fall into despair. I will keep myself hardy till freedom is opportune.
I was a free man. I'm not a slave.
It's now my great pleasure to welcome the cast of the film Looper.
Argo.
Spring Breakers,
Cloud Atlas,
Hotel Transylvania.
Silver Linings Playbook.
It just feels like a real film festival for the community.
It's very exciting for me to be here to support a film.
I wanted to show Toronto the way I experience it.
We want people to like our movies and understand them.
What makes it really special for me is the fact that the audiences have responded the way they have.
If I got lucky in the first two, this was the lottery.
I feel like I hit the jackpot. I mean, I can't believe that I'm sitting at a table, flanked by these people.
Every producer I've ever worked with is in that character. And a couple I invented.
You have to be faithful to what they really were.
But I certainly wouldn't, deign to think that we are godfathering anything.
I do.
And that's why he's got the beard.
First nice thing the press have ever done.
I was really happy to find out this is where we were coming.
I said, I'm in.
The festival of the people who live here.
That was amazing.
Flash photography is not. As a special note, Hannah Schneller, and it is now my pleasure to welcome the director and cast of 12 Years a Slave. Thank you.
Hello. It's very quiet. It's like a church.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. 12 Years a Slave had its world premiere here at TIFF, and we're very glad to have it. It's almost hard to say that we love this film, we like this film, because it's just so tough. But I will say that it's a harrowing film. It's a brutal film. I do love this film. I feel like it's brutal but necessary film. And I'm very pleased to have the director, Steve McQueen, to my left, and then the actors Michael Fassbender, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Lupita Nyong'o, did I butcher that completely?
No, that's fine.
Sarah Paulson and Alfre Woodard. So thank you all very much for being here and for bringing this film. I'm just going to jump right into the deep end. Can we talk about race in America? Is it possible to have that subject in North America? And have people be frank? Are we all too careful? Are we all too fearful? What are your feelings about that?
That's a question about 12 Years a Slave, is it?
Yes.
You know what? I mean, I made this movie because I wanted to tell a story about slavery, a story which for me hadn't been given a platform in cinema. It's one thing to read about slavery, one thing to sort of have these kind of illustrations about slavery, but when you see it on celluloid, when you see it within a narrative, it does something different. And that's what I wanted to do. Now, if that starts off a conversation, wonderful, excellent. It'll be about time. I mean, the conversations are continuing, and they have been done. No, it just goes on and on. This film, for me, is about Solomon Northup and how he survived that unfortunate situation. So I don't know about a conversation. I don't know what kind of conversation you're talking about. You have to be slightly more specific.
Okay.
Because it's very broad. I'm trying to sort of cover all bases here, but I don't know what you mean.
I think everybody who watches this movie has a reaction, and quite rightly so, to...
I hope it goes beyond race.
Yes.
That's what I hope so.
Yes.
I mean, you're trying to narrow it down to race. Yes, race is involved in it, but it's not entirely about that.
I think, yes, you're right. I mean, there's guilt and history, and also the watching people in pain, I think, is a very difficult thing. I imagine that it was, you must have had a lot of conversations in the beginning with your actors about getting to trust one another, because there were things that they have to say to one another and things that they have to do to one another that are very difficult. And I wonder if we can talk a little bit about that, how you establish a sense of trust. At the premiere last night, Michael, you said you couldn't have done it really if you didn't all have a huge amount of kind of faith and trust in one another. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, you could do it, but you wouldn't get to sort of the places that I think that we achieved in the film. Yeah, I mean, it's you're only as good as the sort of person standing opposite you. Especially when you're doing films like this. So, there was a lot of love on set, and there was a lot of support. We were, provoking each other, challenging each other, but essentially at the end of it all, supporting one another, looking after one another, and that's down to Steve. Steve creates that environment on set. It's a very trusting environment. It's a very safe environment to create. I think, it's important to fall on your face a few times, and sort of when you don't have the support railings that you do in a lot of films, like, coverage shots, takes here, and it's literally acting by numbers. This is, the real deal. It's like you have sort of complete takes, and when that's happening, it's like music. There's rhythms there. You have to dance with the cameraman, Sean Bobbitt, and with the fellow players. And if the rhythm's out, you feel it, you see it. But if it's in sync, then it's something special happens. You surprise yourself. You go to places that you didn't imagine. You go to the limit, and then you sort of go beyond it, and you try and maintain that. And that requires an awful lot of focus and a lot of commitment, And if one of us wasn't committing to the other, then something drops and something falls apart.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, a lot of the things that your character specifically does are very cruel, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, Steve. A lot of Steve's movies, Cameron says this a lot, that are about the body and the ways we feel things in the body. Does that affect you in any way when you're playing a character who's cruel? How do you get there?
Well, of course it affects me, but I had a very specific job to do within the confines of the story that was had little to do with me, actually, and had everything to do with the story of Solomon and Patsy. And the only way I was able to kind of put myself in that headspace was to find the reason why, and not as a justification for deplorable behavior, but as a way into it for myself as an actor. And to me, Mistress Epps is a woman just drowning in her own fear of losing her husband, her standing within her own property, and the public sort of nature of this, being usurped by Patsy in the heart of the person that belongs to her. So it's kind of, that was the only way I could really go there. But also it was my job, and I wanted to commit to it whole hog, and to not take my foot off the gas. And there was a relentless quality to her fury, and I just thought it's best to commit to that rather than to pull back.
I mean, these are artists, they're actors. I mean, this is drama. I mean, without people playing people who are appalling, there'll be no drama. I mean, it's their job. That's what they do. They're athletes. I mean, it doesn't mean that it'd be difficult if they couldn't do it. If they couldn't do it, I'll get someone else. They're actors, so we should, come on.
Right, I understand that, but we're also, it's tricky. It's necessary to show torture. And we're watching a movie, so it's this very tricky juxtaposition of entertainment, education, and watching people in pain and causing pain. I just think it's a tricky thing to calibrate.
It's not really.
It's
because
not.
The history writes it the way it is, so we're just there to facilitate it. It's not tricky at all.
Huh.
It's like, what's tricky is when I think people try and sort of, I don't know, sugarcoat it or start messing with it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's there.
Yeah.
So like the reality is there, so you just follow it. It's not.
It's a responsibility to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But it makes it easier
Right.
because it's real. So it happened.
And
so
from the response we're getting in Toronto, people want it. It's just not. Everyone's an adult here. They know how to deal with it. They know how to deal with it. So it's not about sort of sugarcoating it or anything else. The artists, actors, we're here to do something which we feel is necessary for the film.
It's the sort of story that I think just requires 100% commitment from everybody involved. And the only way to do that, I wouldn't be able to do the work that my job in the film if other people weren't doing theirs, you know what I mean? So we have to support each other in that way. We have to work together, and I think if you're it's not, like I think Steve's saying, it's and Michael, it's a historical narrative. It's a first-person primary source. It's a gift from the past. To open a discussion not about race particularly, but about human dignity. And our freedoms. And what we most require in the world. And the only way to really open that discussion is to see all sides of it. That's the only way we can make the film, a film that we would be proud of.
And if you're storytelling, no matter what the story is, if you don't tell it truthfully, then you're disrespecting the audience, the person you're telling it to, and you're disrespecting the process.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. Does somebody have a question for, yes, in the center?
Hi, hello. Ernesto Garrat, Chile, El Mercurio newspaper. I just want to congratulate to Mr. McQueen, an excellent movie. And can you comment, please, how was the first time you read the book, and what it was, if was so important to you in a way to make this wonderful movie? Eso. Thank you. Gracias.
Well, what happened in the beginning is I wanted to make a film about slavery. It was sort of a whole, I think, that I basically, I wanted to see images from that particular past. I wanted to experience it through images. And what happened was that I had this idea that of a free man in North America at that time who would have been kidnapped into slavery, and that he goes through this sort of assault course, unfortunate assault course of the sort of regime of slavery. And I got together with John Ridley to write the script, and things were going, but it's hard. Things were going a bit sort of not as well as I wanted. And I was talking to my wife, and I said, I told her what was going on, and she said, well, why don't you look into true accounts of slavery? Duh. And myself and her, we researched it, and she came up with this book, 12 Years a Slave. As soon as she put it in my hand, I didn't let it go. It was just remarkable. Each turn of the page was a revelation. It was just, I couldn't believe, because when you have an idea and then you see it in your hand as a book, it was just amazing. And I live in Amsterdam, so the comparison for me was at Anne Frank, because it was like 100 years earlier this book was around. And I was upset with myself that I didn't know about this book, but then I realized no one I knew about this book. No one. And then that's when I thought, yes, I want to make this book, I want to make this film, this book into a film, and that was it. And that's when Plan B came on board, and Brad Pitt, and yeah, things got rolling.
Yes,
Hi.
in the back.
Hi, Juan Carlos Garcia from Mexico City. This question is for Lupita. Yeah. Lupita, big surprise, I realized that you were born in Mexico and your name is more Mexican than the mole. I would like to know about the background and how long time you have been outside of Mexico, and if you are aware about Mexican situation right now, how is it, and can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, well, yes, I was born in Mexico, but I moved back to Kenya, where my family is from, before I turned 1. And I grew up in Kenya, but my parents sent me back to Mexico to learn Spanish when I was 16. So I did spend some time in Mexico in my adolescence. And then I came to study in the US. So of course, I have a special place for Mexico in my heart. It's my birthplace. And yeah, I don't know, have I answered your question?
If you get the Oscar, you're going to say that you are Mexican.
Why not?
I say I'm a Mexicanian.
Mexicanian. Yes, question there in the middle, and then you, sir.
Well, this question is for Mr. McQueen. Congratulations for the movie. I'm from Colombia. And I wanted to ask you about the audience's reaction, because in the theater was like very shocking to see people react to the movie. A lot of people were sobbing, people, pretty shocked. And of course, everybody's talking about the Oscar buzz. This is the best campaign that you guys can do for that. What are the expectations from now to February that is like all this career to the Oscars?
Well, my expectations have been met. I've made the movie. I remember someone telling me, "You're an impossible movie," and we made it. And that's it for me. I mean, I did the best I could. Everything, every bone, every muscle, sacrificed my family, attention and being with them, everything. So I'm just happy. This is it for me. It's made, and I'm in, Toronto with these amazing artists. So, if anything else comes our way, it'll be great. But what I'm most happy with is that it actually got made. And Plan B, Didi Gardner, Anthony Katagas, Jeremy Kleiner, Brad Pitt, these are the people who rolled up their sleeves and actually made this film happen. So I'm happy. That's it.
Front row,
Hi.
please.
Is this on? Oh, good. This is for Chair Waddell. In addition to film acting, I know that you've been regularly appearing on the London stage. And I want to say that I feel very fortunate to have seen you in Othello, and also last month in a season in the Congo. So my question is, how do you mix the two? Is your approach to playing characters on screen different from on the stage? How does that work for you?
Well, it's a different world, really. Trying to the characters on stage. The stories can be as rich, but your approach is different. You can't. You have to be sort of slightly more. You have to consider your decisions within the ideas of theatre craft, and stagecraft a lot more. If you, which is really thinking about how you sustain a performance for 8 shows a week for months at a time, how you, hit the back of an auditorium, how do you communicate in a room something that can be nuanced or subtle that you can do in a film. You have to approach it in a completely different way. So it ends up working a completely different set of muscles, which I love doing theatre. I've done it since I started acting, but but it's impossible to compare to an experience in a way, just to technically compare to an experience like this film, where you're not really using theatrical muscles at all. You know, that you're actually trying to approach something much rawer, much more immediate.
One of the strongest things about this film, I think, is the way hope moves in and out of the story. That you feel at a lot of times that all hope is lost, and then some hope comes back. Can you talk a little bit about calibrating that for you as your character? Just, you know, sort of every time he thinks he can change things, something, you know, there's a lot of up and down with him.
You know, it's a fight for his soul. You know, he's a war for his psychology, for his mind, for his spirit, for his heart, and it's a very silent war in a way, and but a war nonetheless. And there are moments where there are beats where he thinks he can win, and these are almost as harrowing, because hope is complicated, you know, and certainly in that kind of scenario, hope is a double-edged sword. But to abandon hope is to lose his mind. So I think every sequence is calibrated, and this is really where Steve really shapes the story, I think, in this remarkable way, is leading you through his psychology and where he is winning in that battle for his own mind, and where he's close to losing.
Mm-hmm. Question in the middle there? Yes?
Yes, this question is for Mr. McQueen. Jamal with Black Tree TV. Yesterday after the screening, I had the pleasure of speaking to Skip Gates, and I asked him what question would he ask you if he was a journalist. He said, how would this movie have been different if it was done by an African American instead of a Brit? And I was wondering, like, what do you think, being a British man, did it change your perspective at all? Or do you think if you was, you know, living in America, your whole life would have been a little different?
Well, first of all, I don't really like to draw those kind of lines, you know, nationalism or whatever it is. You know, yes, I'm British. My parents come from the West Indies, Grenada. My mother was born in Trinidad. Grenada is where Malcolm X's mother was born. Trinidad is where Carvey Michael was born, who coined the phrase Black Power. You know, it's complex. It's not so simple. You know, Marcus Garvey, Colin Powell, you know, Sidney Poitier, you know, Harold Belafonte. I mean, America, West Indian, you know, British. It's about this. You know, it's about slavery. I mean, you know, we got Chiwetel, British, Nigerian. We have Lupita, you know, Mexican, Kenyan. You know, it's about that triangle as such. So, you know, it's not about me being British. It's about me being part of that history.
Oh, sorry, these people in the middle have been waiting. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Giovanna Grassi, Corriere della Sera, Italy. Thanks to all of you for the movie. At the end of the movie, I wanted to know more and more about this man. So my curiosity is, how is possible that no one knew where he died? He had nephew, children, grandchildren. Did you do some research?
Yes, there has been research, and we did actually do some research with Skip Gates, and there's no date or place or wherever he was found where he died. We know about his, you know, records. We know about something about his wife or what happened to her afterwards, but him, nothing. There's no. I mean, maybe now there'll be more, but there's been a lot of investigation into whatever happened to him, and nothing has occurred.
Who published the book? The publisher of the book doesn't know anything?
Well, it was published in 1853. The first edition was then, of course. I mean, you know, but you know, it's about. We don't know. We just don't know, unfortunately.
It's very curious.
I mean, yeah. I mean, a lot of people get lost, and how they died, and where they died, what circumstances that they died. We don't know. I mean, Solomon was involved in the Underground Railroad. He was a tideless, you know, worker for freedom of slaves. We just don't know right now. Hopefully, who knows? We might unearth what happened to him now, just as we unearthed the book. Let's hope.
question in the back and then in the front here. Yep.
Hello, I'm Isabelle Régnier. I write for Le Monde, the French newspaper. Well, congratulations on the film. I have just a very factual question. We were expecting the film in Cannes and then in Venice, and finally it very happily premiered here. Do you have, I suppose the question would be for your producers, but what's the explanation? Why didn't the film go to Venice or to Cannes before Toronto?
Well, it wasn't finished. It just wasn't finished. And, it takes a lot of time to get it right, and it wasn't finished, and I didn't want to rush. Rush to do what? It wasn't finished. So I would have, again, it's just, look, I've been blessed with showing premiere in Cannes and Venice, and this time it took a different direction just because of the movie wasn't finished in time. That's all really. I'm sorry to trying to make it kind of interesting, the answer, but that was about it, the mechanics, sorry.
Front row, thanks.
Mariah Doty with Yahoo Movies. Oh, there I am. My question is for Steve. Brad Pitt tends to play heroic, likable characters for the most part. Did he consider other roles? I know he's one of a very few characters that has, some redeeming qualities in terms of the people who play the white people in the cast. So did he consider Michael Fassbender's role or Benedict Cumberbatch's role? I'm just curious.
I don't think it was his to consider. And in that way, that's not how we do things. We talked and we talked about Bass, and that was him. What was interesting about Brad is that he kind of fits quite well as Bass. What he's doing in New Orleans and so forth and whatnot, and also the debate. I think he was very interested in that kind of level of debate about he's the only one who confronts Epps verbally. And I think that kind of boxing match, who doesn't want to see Michael Fassbender and Brad Pitt sort of doing some meat and potato acting about the reasons why this film, the reasons why this situation has occurred. He's been confronted. You got Michael Fassbender, you got Brad Pitt doing this sort of great scene together. So for me, it was a no-brainer and fantastic.
Yeah, one of the other great things about this story is that it has quite naturally very, very different points of view, sort of on every part of the prism. Alfre's character in particular is interesting in that, the question of how much do you participate, how much are you trying to save yourself in a situation like this. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of research you might have done into your character and people like her?
I think when we look at this film, and when we look at history, we have to understand that people live smack in the middle of the times that they live. We get to, in reflection, decide, oh, I would have been here, oh, I would have been there. And that's very simplistic, but just as every day we find a place amongst the savory and unsavory circumstances that we live in, we find a place to continue to live and to hopefully thrive and to be there. And you learn to live to fight another day, or learn to live another day. And I think that's something that Mistress Shaw does. There is no room when you're in the middle of life. There's only room to figure out how to keep your head up and the heads of people that you love. And so you always do what you have to do. I think it is a very complex portrait of life in a slave economy that Steve has drawn and shown us. And for Mistress Shaw, and I think for Mistress Epps and for Patsy, women found a way to be present and to live another day, no matter what it was. So and each of you could talk about that, but you take your circumstances and you figure out if you have power, if you have ambition and expectation, you don't judge yourself even. And as we look at this also, you just mentioned the white characters, thinking that there weren't that many there who were of sort of sound moral stance. I mean, I think there were tons of them. And I think, and even with Epps, we see the struggle that he's having. And so I think, again, what's Benedict's character's name? Ford. If he's going to leave his family and go tilting against the slave system, he would have been gone like that. So again, he found a way to live. I thought he was a good man, but that's a whole other discussion. I think we're judging, I think we can't judge in black and white. You said he was a slaver?
No, I was just quoting the movie.
Oh. Well, yeah, but it's like, I'm a capitalist too, and think of the things that are done in the name of capitalism, but you try to do great deeds in your surroundings. And I think Mistress Shaw was, I get her. Mm-hmm. And to prepare for it, I just had to be alive a long time as an African-American woman. And there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's always a strong movie that forces the audience to say, what would I do in that circumstance? Did you find yourself asking those questions when you were first reading the script in this story? Do you need to place yourselves in a certain place in the story to be able to, how much thinking of that did you guys find yourselves doing in the course of making this, I guess is what I'm asking. Do you want to start?
I suppose you think those things, you know, I mean, it's only natural, but it's kind of like somebody runs out of a store and they've grabbed somebody's handbag. Do you run after them? Those sort of decisions are made. It's kind of impossible to say, you know, kind of like what Alfred was saying, you know, it's times like that are scary. It's like, you know, if Ford had stood up, like you said, his entire family would have gone down the drain. He would have, you know, his life would have been a mess. It would have been over. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what I tried to do is try to facilitate the character. Again, going back to what Sarah said, you know, the responsibility to portray the character as a human being, as opposed to sort of me standing outside of it and going, God, Epps is a terrible person, isn't he? I'm going to portray a terrible person. I've got to try and understand him. I've tried to get under his skin and do it to the best of my ability. I think, you know, what would I have done in those? I think it's impossible to answer those questions. And again, in hindsight, everything's sort of easy to sort of, you know, filter. It's, for me, impossible to say.
Yes, over there on the end.
This is another question for Michael. Your character, where did you develop the eccentricities of his character from, this kind of disturbing tenderness he sometimes has? Was it in the script?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the script because, you know, he's in love with Patsy. So, you know, that was something that Steve and I talked about right at the beginning. Steve always sort of quizzed you. He's like, so what do you think about Epps? So I kind of went down sort of the line of answering him, and I said to him then, I kind of hold by it now, he's sort of, I think, you know, for me, he was kind of tragic character because he is in love with Patsy and couldn't process that love, didn't know what to do with it, so he ends up beating her to try and beat it out of himself. And I just thought that he was a really a sort of culmination of all the sort of ugliness of that time and the slave trade in this sort of human being that I could represent. It's like a boil on the skin of the society at the time. So I see him as a victim as well, you know, it's and I guess sort of looking at him like that and sort of trying to find the human being, it helps you sort of avoid becoming like the cliched sort of evil sort of, you know, slave owner or landowner. It was important to find a human being so that audience members, even, you know, as horrendous as he is at times, they recognize things in him, you know? They're like, oh shit, you know, there's something there that I see, that I recognize. And then I think it's more effective.
Sorry, the guy with the mic there.
Kerry Roberts, The Next Take on Super Channel. My question is for Sarah. 2 years ago, your film Martha Marcy was here playing at TIFF. I'd just like to ask you about the importance of a film playing at this festival, bringing attention to the film as we progress into a very busy fall season that has a very crowded marketplace.
Well, there's one major difference in that Sean Durkin hadn't really made a feature film at that point, so it was a very big launch for him to be here. And for the movie itself, as a writer-director, he had done a short film that I think got a lot of attention at Cannes, if I remember correctly, but this was the real launch for him, whereas Steve has made beautiful movies prior to this, so this is, of course, a very good place to be beginning all of this, although I guess it started in Telluride. But yeah. Is that an answer? I don't know. Sorry.
Sorry. There's a woman here with the mic. Yep. Yeah.
Hello. I wondered how and if you could relate the film to Django Unchained. And I also wondered how you'd respond to those people that left the premiere yesterday unable to cope with the violence.
I think that's for you.
In fact, I mean, the two different movies about slavery. That's the only way I can answer that question, really. That's about it. I mean, again, it's lots of different kind of gangster movies or different kinds of, westerns and whatnot. In fact, when I was in New Orleans, I bumped into Tarantino, Quentin. And we had a discussion, and he said to me, I hope it's okay to have like more than one slavery film. I said, yeah, of course. It's like having more than one gangster movie, having more than one western. So that was kind of, that sort of answers that question very straightforwardly. The other side of the question was what? What was this?
People left.
Left. Yeah. I mean, great. I mean, I'm not great, but there's certain things some people aren't going to be able to sit through. Just like a bad movie, and I understand. I mean, that's fine, but the vast majority, were there, were giving us a standing ovation. So I just take heart from that, really.
Could I, Steve?
Sure.
I think this is something that have you all seen the film? Mostly have seen the film. So one of the great powers that you have is the ability to let the public know whatever you feel artistically or how critically in your discipline, however you feel about the movie, you have the ability to let people know that it's a film that they should see. Because even people that are very excited and have been really endorsing and saying, I've been changed by watching this, they are also using the words like intense, hard, all that. And so as contemporary people, we tend to shy away from those things, but you have to also say, but you have to see it, because it is there. You will see terrible circumstance, but you will see beautiful circumstances. You will see all of these played out beautifully and masterfully, and it's a film that you shouldn't miss, whether you are a cinephile or whether you are a workaday Jane and John. It is a film that fills a void in us, I think, collectively and personally. Yes, about history, but also just about ourselves as human beings. That's why I think Steve could not follow you all the way, Johanna, when we started off talking about race, because it goes so much more individually, personally past race.
I mean, this film for me is about love. It's about love. And it's a funny word, love, because it's sort of, hardly ever, it's not used in any kind of, it's seen as silly, obviously in this kind of context, but that's it. That's what the film's about. It's about love. And, excuse me, yeah, that's it. And it's one of those things where, there's a lot of pain in love sometimes, but you have to get through it. And it's the journey of Solomon Northup, who gets through back to his family, and that's the journey I wanted to go on. And it's just like life, huh? Mm-hmm. Tough. Mm-hmm. And we get through it.
To not show what he went through as explicitly as we can would, I think, be a disservice to him and his journey. And there would be, in a way, no point in telling the story if we couldn't tell the story, you know. And I just sort of feel passionately that that's what's amazing about what.
If we couldn't tell the story,
yeah,
that's great.
what Stephen's done, and he's told this story, you know.
All right, I think that's a really good note to end on.
More questions?
Okay, sure, sure.
I have a question.
My question is for Steve and Alfred. It's actually for all of you guys, but there's been like just a handful of slave narratives in American cinema, and I wanted to know, like, was there any like forethought on what nuances that you wanted to bring in this story that we haven't seen in slave stories before? I mean, y'all spoke a little bit on love and the women characters, but was there something in particular that we hadn't seen in Roots and some of the more farcical?
No, I didn't
recent
look at any
movies?
films or TV shows. I didn't want that wasn't my interest. My interest was like the book and the landscape. So no, is the answer to that question. I didn't look at any other films. No.
One of the things that as a person involved in the film, but also as a viewer, because I'm also like a regular American film goer, and I like that. One of the things that I think this film allows is, because it's so complex and there's so many different kinds of characters, it gives us, and I don't think we've had this before, it gives us plenty of places to identify within it. Because before, you'd always, white people would say, oh, I wasn't there, I don't want to know about that. And black people say, oh, you know, you're bumming me out, it makes me sad. Because you couldn't, you know, and some people say, oh, I would have run away, or I would have killed the master, all of that. But this one is so complex because he has actually created the reality that we can imagine not only ourselves in some of these situations, but we can imagine our forebearers in these situations. I can recognize people and say, oh, that's how my great-great-grandmother might have walked. She might have been over there. Or Sarah, oh, and it may not have been that Mrs. Epps. It might have been a woman in Saratoga before Solomon left. So I think that's what's wonderful and exciting about this and makes it a big gift, is that it's a reality, a day-to-day reality that I don't think we've seen before.
And also, if I can add, there's a lot of shame about history, about slavery in America and the West Indies. There's a lot of shame, you know, and it's that line where Solomon says, you know, forgive me, and the wife says, and the wife says to him, there's nothing to forgive. That's for me one of the most powerful lines in the movie, because you know there's nothing to be forgiven for. It wasn't your fault. This is what happened to you. So you know that was very key.
Well, I'm sorry, I wish we could take more questions, but they need to get the next press conference in here. So thank you all. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for a great movie. Thank you.